My name is Tatum Julie Nicole Wright. I was previously known as Tatum Nicole Dittmeyer. This is because I was a foster kid for about 3 or 4 years before being adopted at age 11 by the old vice principal at my previous elementary school. For the most part, I thought I lived a happy childhood before I got into the system until I learned otherwise. Growing up, I didn't always have 3 meals a day like you'd see in a traditional American household. This led to me being very malnourished and very underfed. According to Freud, who studied behaviors, in my early years, because of this, being underfed led to me being very trusting and very overly dependent on others, and that is definitely reflected in my everyday life now. Now, I wouldn't say this affected my self-image in any certain way, shape, or form, but definitely growing up, like any other kid, you're gonna have those body issues or whatnot. No, I'm not saying I was fit like the other kids my age, because for the most part, while other kids were running at recess and having fun in PE, I wasn't able to always go to school. So during that time frame, I'd be locked in a room with my 3 siblings for hours on end. It wasn't very spacious for that part, so I didn't get the same fitness level as the other kids were getting. According to Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, the basic conflict of trust versus mistrust is formed in the age of infancy through terms of feeding. So this idea of not always being able to rely on when my next meal is coming led to me having some mistrust growing up and where I am at today. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need your basic needs met, your sense of belonging, your esteem, and all that whatnot before you can reach self-actualization, which comes later in life. What's interesting about this, though, is that you can only be on one certain stage on that pyramid and not on multiple during certain points in your life, which is something I kind of disagree with because things are interchangeable in my own personal opinion, but obviously not in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Because if this were the way that Maslow envisioned it on being, I wouldn't have made it past the basic needs stage until the age of 8. Moving to Alfred Adler, he believed that human beings had one desire, which is to fulfill the need to belong and to feel significant. Adler also believed that birth order greatly affected this. So up until the point that I was adopted, I was always second oldest, and even when I was adopted, I was the second oldest. But because of the actions my sister took in her life and the irresponsibility she had on her part led me to having to take on older responsibilities, which changed me as a person for the rest of my life. According to Piaget's stages of development, it starts with sensory motor from infancy to 2 years, pre-operational from 2 to 6 years, concrete operational 7 to 12 years, and formal operational 12 years to adulthood. Now, when I was put into foster care, I was 8 years old, which would put me on the spectrum of concrete operational, which is the child can think logically about concrete objects and can thus add and subtract. The child can also understand conversation. So while I was on that stage, I had other things going on in my life, so I had a hard time in math, for example, and I had a hard time in speaking in conversations in full sentences. I was just super behind. I want to kind of take a step back and think about my physical, emotional, moral, social, and intellectual developments and see how far they've gone from then to now. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this next phase of things. Now, during this time of like 3rd grade to 6th grade, I had a lot going on in my life. For example, when I had to deal with losing my parents, not being with my brothers, having to go through that foster care system, having to go through all these therapies and doing all this stuff, I also was growing up, and this affected my self-image. It affected my health. I got fatter, I gained a lot of weight, I ate a lot, I snuck food. It was just not a healthy lifestyle for me. Now with Freud's defense mechanisms, I started going through denial. I refused to believe that was even happening. I was repressing all these thoughts from my past. I was going through every single defense mechanism on Freud's spectrum. I was displacing things, rationalizing things, reaction formation, and it was just not a good thing. My head was running 1,000,000 miles an hour when I was only 8 years old. During that time of being in foster care, I was between the school age and then to adolescence, when I had to have the conflict of industry versus inferiority and identity versus role confusion. This comes from Erickson's psychosocial stages of development. This affected my schoolwork and my relationships with other people. Now, looking back at all the things I had to go through in my younger years, when I think about on how they affected me now, emotionally, I think I became a better person because I've always been, as you can see in the pictures, a very happy and a very bright child. And I kept that through everything, and I think that's the only reason I made it through as strong as I did. And ever since I've been in Heather and Justin's care, which is my adoptive mom and my adoptive father, I've grown so much in so many areas. My self-image has improved. I am more confident in what I do. I'm not held back by anything. My health, I eat a little better. I work out. I sleep better knowing at night that I have 3 meals a day and I have somewhere I can rely on, and I'm so blessed because of that. Emotionally, I'm more mature, of course, not only because of age, but because of my experiences. And because of these experiences I had to go through, I was able to push through and ultimately become a better person. And intellectually, with my mom and dad's help, they've pushed me to become better. They were on my butt about missing assignments and grades, and ultimately they helped me in the long run. Now that I'm applying for colleges, I have good grades. I have a 3.2 GPA. I have good grades such as A's and B's. Before, I was even at school. Now I'm at school every day. But I also don't want to forget about that not only, of course, I went through foster care and that affected me greatly growing up when I was younger, but also, all throughout my life, I've had, my sister who is diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, so she attaches to people and is very emotionally hurtful, and she's just a very destructive person at times. So I've had to deal with that, and as of last year, I had to deal with my mom's breast cancer and had to go through her treatments and had to help out a lot more, as well as last year I was also found out that my dad died from being hit by a car. So going through all those emotional tolls, I was able to realize how much my adoptive mom, my adoptive dad has helped me throughout my life, because I was prepared to deal with these things as an adult, basically. And just to reflect back on to Piaget's stages of development, he says in the formal operational stage, from 12 years to adult, the adolescent can reason abstractly and think in hypothetical terms. I can promise you that if it weren't for me being in foster care, going through everything, and having my parents help me through this process, I wouldn't have been able to be where I'm at now. I wouldn't be on formal operational. I'd probably still be on pre-operational and just have a hard time just thinking logically. And I am blessed because of that once again. Now, I'd like to take a step back and look at Freud, Erikson, Maslow, Adler, Piaget, all those people who took a step back during life and looked at things in a psychological way. They thought about the process of the brain and how it makes us the person we are now. And it makes me think about how far I've come. I've been in a bad household. I went through the process of foster care. I don't live with my brothers anymore. I can't be that big sister. I had my mom who had breast cancer. I have a sister who has borderline personality. I have my dad who died last year among all the trivial things that happen to a teenager during that time, I can look back and see through Erikson's notes on psychosocial stages and see why I am the way I am, or look at Freud's defense mechanisms and look at what I'm doing now to justify mistakes I'm doing and protect myself. And I can look at what he said about regression and returning to more primitive levels of behavior, for example, and recognize that and become better than that. So I would like to thank you for your time and listening to my story, as well as listening to my take on psychology and how it affects my life. Thank you, and goodbye.